Welcome back to Close Up and our extended conversation with Senator Jeanne Shaheen. Senator, of course, you've been one of the leading voices for a long time speaking out against Russian aggression in Eastern Europe. And the last time you were here in December, we were talking about the threat of war in Ukraine. And sure enough, it came. Right after that came those massive sanctions. New York Times reporting this last week, though, that the full bite of those sanctions hasn't really sunk in just yet. The shipping to Russia continues because those contracts haven't been hit exactly. So what can you point to that those sanctions are doing or will soon do to really try to cripple this Russian war effort, which seems to be teetering a little bit?
Well, I think the sanctions that are going to be most effective are those that both go after their banking industry, but also the ones that go after the energy industry. And what we've seen is that most of Europe now has said that they're going to get off of Russian oil and gas, which is going to have a huge impact because that's how they're financing the war. And we need to continue to encourage that and help countries like Bulgaria, which Russia just cut off because Bulgaria is no longer pro-Russian, and we need to make sure that they don't face energy shortages, and I think do everything we can to try and prevent that so that countries have that freedom to weigh in against Russia's war in Ukraine, which, as we see every night on the news, is just horrific.
You know, as it gets more difficult for Russia, there's a sense that Vladimir Putin might become more desperate to sort of prove something to the world. What is the appropriate United States response if he does use something like a tactical nuclear weapon?
Well, I think the administration is exploring different options, and I'm not going to get into those because I don't think we want to talk about those. But I think, as we heard from Avril Haines, the director of national intelligence, the discussions around what to do in certain circumstances are happening now so that we will be united in our response. But I think what's important is, first of all, we need to get the aid for Ukraine. We have a $40 billion package that is sitting in the Senate that we need to get approved this coming week. It includes military hardware and ammunition, which the Ukrainians really need to keep up this fight. It also includes help for their economy because they have been hit so hard from the Russian attacks. And it also includes food. One of the things that we know is happening is that because Ukraine feeds so much of the Middle East and parts of Europe, that when their food is no longer available, that it has real impact. So making sure that there is help, because what we don't want is a ripple effect in countries that are then going to have a shortage of food. So we need to get that done. We need to continue to support an enhanced forward presence, it's called, on the Eastern Front. So all of those countries that border Ukraine and Russia that are the eastern flank of NATO, we need to make sure that there are troops there. So we're sending a very strong message to Vladimir Putin that NATO is prepared and he better not go, you know, step one into any NATO country. And then we're looking at Sweden and Finland, who are likely going to join NATO. We've heard that Finland voted this week saying that they plan to do that. We met with the Deputy Secretary General of NATO this week, and he said that we are expecting Sweden and Finland to put in a formal application in mid-May, and then we want to, as quickly as possible, see the Senate ratify those applications so that we get Sweden and Finland as part of NATO.
I want to get to more on NATO in a bit, but that $40 billion aid package, is this a blank check? You know, some have questioned, there was broad bipartisan support for this, but some have questioned why we're spending so much money in this country. Is there a limit to this? Because this could drag on for a while.
Well, certainly we need to make sure that the money is spent well, and we had a hearing with a number of officials from the State Department yesterday in the Foreign Relations Committee, and this came up, and we heard both from someone from the USAID about humanitarian aid and the oversight that we're providing on that humanitarian aid. And I know that our military is working very closely with the Ukrainians, with our NATO allies, on exactly what's going into Ukraine. And they are ensuring that everything that's going in is being used and is well spent. But I think the important point, Adam, is that The Ukrainians right now are fighting for not just their freedom and democracy, but for democracies in Europe and around the world. If Vladimir Putin is allowed to be successful here in Ukraine, who knows where he's going to go next? He's going to threaten the Baltic nations. He's going to threaten the Balkans in southern Europe. There is real concern about what he might do in Moldova. So we need to stop him in Ukraine, and thank God for the Ukrainians who are so courageous. They are spilling their blood in this fight. We're just providing help and support so that they can do that.
Is it a bridge too far to get Ukraine into NATO now? I mean, obviously that would draw the United States into the conflict, but is that on the table in the future, do you think, if they're able to hold out here?
Well, there's going to be a summit in Madrid of all the NATO countries, and President Zelensky is going to be there. I'm sure he's going to make the pitch for why in the future Ukraine should be part of NATO. But that's a decision that the NATO partners will make.
What about war crimes? You know, we've heard Zelensky call this a genocide, which by the book may be a little bit of a stretch, but what's the evidence that the Russians are committing war crimes in Ukraine?
Oh, I think we can see that every night on television. The horrific stories coming out of Bucha, the stories from survivors of civilians being gunned down who are not engaged in the fight, the massive destruction of towns when not targeting military sites, but targeting civilians, hospitals and schools, when they knew that there were children and women in those sites. And yes, we should be doing everything possible to help the Ukrainians analyze the documentation that they are collecting to make the case that these are war crimes that are being committed. And in many cases, we actually know who the individual military commanders are on the ground for Russia.
You touched on the energy implications of this, and Bulgaria has an immediate problem. New England might have a long-term problem because of how much we rely on natural gas, and ISO New England has talked for years about how precarious things could be if the market gets thrown off a bit in those coldest days in the winter. The threat is there of rolling blackouts. So what's the plan to ensure that New England has the natural gas it needs at even a somewhat reasonable price this coming winter?
Well, first of all, I think we need to continue to put pressure on our allies in the Middle East who have been unwilling, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, who have been unwilling to increase their supplies of oil. We also need to look at our oil companies here in the United States, which reduced production during COVID because there was less demand during the pandemic. Now they're reluctant to increase production because they want to keep the prices up. Well, we need to put pressure on them to make sure that they are increasing supply, because we're going to need that, as you say. We're going to need it this winter when it gets cold and people need to heat their homes. We're going to need it in our cars. And, you know, I applaud the residents of New Hampshire in this country who have been willing to pay increased prices at the pumps in order to support the Ukrainians, because they know this is an effort to help them. But people can't do that indefinitely, and so we need to look at every way we can to address those high costs.
A lot of your fellow Democrats are saying fossil fuels should be put in the rearview mirror, but you're saying, hey, time out, we need to do this first. You know, Russia needs to be dealt with before we do anything else on that front.
Well, I think we can do both. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can increase production for this short-term emergency, but we can also continue to transfer to alternative sources of energy, and we need to be doing that, and we're seeing Europe do that.
All right. Senator Jeanne Shaheen, thanks so much for joining us here on Close Up. We appreciate your time.